There's a point where you become so wealthy, so powerful, that the rules simply stop applying to you. Not because you're above the law, at least not officially, but because the systems designed to enforce those laws can't actually touch you. They can't shut you down without causing chaos. And they certainly can't force you to comply when you control infrastructure that governments themselves depend on. Elon Musk crossed that line, and a discovery made by an amateur radio enthusiast in October 2025 proves exactly how untouchable he's become. His company is operating 170 secret spy satellites in direct violation of international law. The evidence is documented, experts have confirmed the violations, and yet, months later, nothing has happened. No fines, no penalties, no forced compliance. Because when you're Elon Musk, the richest person on Earth with a net worth that fluctuates around $400 billion, what exactly can anyone do to stop you? This is the story of how one man's private company can break the rules while governments watch helplessly. The discovery that exposed Elon Musk. In October 2025, Tilley, an amateur satellite tracker in British Columbia, accidentally stumbled onto something extraordinary. While monitoring frequencies from his home setup, he detected signals that shouldn't exist. He was looking at the 2025 to 2110 MHz frequency band, a range internationally designated for one specific purpose: sending commands from Earth up to satellites. It's called an uplink band. But Tilley's equipment was picking up signals coming down from space on frequencies that should be empty of downlink transmissions. He recorded the data, cross-referenced it with a global database of satellite positions maintained by amateur trackers worldwide, and discovered the source: Starshield satellites. Starshield is SpaceX's classified military satellite network, built for the U.S. National Reconnaissance Office, the intelligence agency that operates spy satellites. The U.S. government has reportedly paid SpaceX over $1.8 billion for this network, and according to Tilley's findings, at least 170 of these satellites are transmitting on frequencies that violate international telecommunications standards set by the United Nations. Here's what makes this discovery so revealing. It's not about whether the satellites work. It's about the fact that when the rules became inconvenient, SpaceX simply ignored them. And no one stopped them. Why these rules exist. The International Telecommunications Union, a UN agency, created these frequency allocations for a reason. Radio spectrum is a limited resource. Without coordination, signals interfere with each other. Satellites stop responding to commands, scientific research gets disrupted. Communication systems fail. That's why the 2025 to 2110 MHz band is designated for uplinks only. When everyone follows the rules, the system works. But SpaceX's Starshield network is using these frequencies for downlinks, transmitting data from space to Earth on channels reserved for the opposite direction. Not one or two satellites, 170. And here's the detail that reveals intent. Tilley observed that while all the signals appear in the prohibited range, the precise frequencies keep shifting. This makes them harder for outside observers to detect and track. Kevin Gifford, a computer science professor at the University of Colorado Boulder who specializes in spacecraft radio interference, offered this assessment when asked about SpaceX's approach. They're smart and savvy, and it's possible they decided to just do it and ask forgiveness later. Translation: SpaceX likely knew the rules. They broke them anyway, and they calculated, correctly, that by the time anyone noticed, it would be too late to do anything about it. Because what's the alternative? Force SpaceX to shut down 170 military satellites that the US government paid $1.8 billion for? Demand they rebuild them to comply with international law? Who has that kind of leverage over a company run by the richest man on Earth? This is what regulatory capture looks like in the 21st century. It's not about bribing officials or corrupting the system. It's about becoming so large, so essential, so integrated into critical infrastructure that the cost of enforcement becomes politically impossible. SpaceX currently operates roughly 60% of all active satellites orbiting Earth, over 6,000 satellites from their Starlink constellation alone. Governments around the world depend on Starlink for internet connectivity in remote regions. The US military uses it for communication. Ukraine relies on it for wartime coordination. Emergency services use it during disasters. You can't shut down a company that essential, even when they break the rules. And Elon Musk knows this. When Tilley published his findings in October 2025, he wasn't just documenting a technical violation. He was exposing a fundamental truth about power in the modern world. International law only works when someone can enforce it, and no one can enforce it against Elon Musk. Tilley warned that these illegal transmissions could interfere with other satellites, causing them to not respond properly to commands or ignore commands from Earth. Kevin Gifford confirmed, "I think it is definitely happening." But even with documented violations and confirmed interference, the response from SpaceX was silence. No comment to NPR when they requested a statement, no comment to Live Science when they published their investigation in November 2025. Because they don't have to respond. What's the penalty? A fine? SpaceX generated an estimated $15 billion in revenue in 2024. Elon Musk's personal wealth increases or decreases by billions in a single day based on Tesla stock movements. A regulatory fine, even a massive one, is a rounding error. The pattern of impunity. This isn't the first time SpaceX has caused problems with radio emissions and gotten away with it. In 2023, astronomers discovered that Starlink Generation 1 satellites were leaking massive amounts of unintended electromagnetic radiation into space, radio pollution that interfered with radio astronomy research. A 2024 follow-up study confirmed that Generation 2 satellites had the same problem. Research published earlier this year warned that if left unchecked, this radio pollution could eventually disrupt all forms of ground-based radio astronomy, humanity's primary method of studying the universe beyond visible light. And what happened? Nothing. SpaceX kept launching satellites, the interference continued, and the astronomical community had to adapt because they couldn't force compliance from a company that controls 60% of all satellites in orbit. This is the reality of concentrated power in the space age. When one private company, run by one individual, controls the majority of orbital infrastructure, traditional regulatory mechanisms become obsolete. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Starshield isn't just a private venture. It's a classified program operated by the National Reconnaissance Office, a U.S. intelligence agency. SpaceX built the satellites, but the government is the customer and the operator. This creates a perfect accountability vacuum. When journalists contacted SpaceX to comment, SpaceX stayed silent, likely deferring to their government client. When journalists contacted the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO stayed silent, likely citing classified program restrictions. So who's responsible for the violations? The company that built the satellites? The government agency that operates them? The contractor who specified the requirements? The engineers who designed the transmission systems? Everyone can point to someone else, and in that confusion, accountability disappears entirely. According to reporting from multiple sources, SpaceX has launched 11 separate batches of Starshield satellites since May 2024, all as part of the NRO's proliferated system. That means this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was systematic deployment of non-compliant satellites over 18 months, with full knowledge from both SpaceX and the US government. And still, no enforcement, no penalties, no forced compliance. Because when a $400 billion CEO builds satellites for the world's most powerful government, who exactly has the authority to say no? This is the fundamental truth that Tilley's discovery exposed. International law depends on voluntary compliance and enforcement mechanisms. But what happens when the violator is too big to shut down without causing global disruption? The violator has government contracts that make them politically untouchable. The financial penalties are meaningless compared to the violator's wealth. The technical complexity makes public understanding difficult. The classification of related programs prevents transparency. you get exactly what we're seeing: documented violations, expert confirmation of harm, public exposure of the evidence, and absolutely zero consequences. Tilley's discovery revealed that 170 satellites are operating outside international law right now. The International Telecommunications Union, the UN agency responsible for spectrum coordination, is supposedly waiting for clarification on compliance with their regulations. But the ITU has no enforcement power. They can't fine SpaceX, they can't force the US to comply, they can issue statements and express concern and request cooperation. And SpaceX can simply ignore them. This is the new reality of space governance. The rules only matter if someone powerful enough decides to enforce them. And when the rule breaker is the richest person on Earth, running a company that controls most of orbital space, partnering with the world's most dominant military power, enforcement becomes a fantasy. 170 satellites, operating in violation of international telecommunications law, right now, as you watch this. Built by a company run by the richest human being alive. Operated by the US intelligence community. Discovered by an amateur astronomer with a radio receiver in his backyard. And the response from those responsible? Silence. Not because they're hiding, but because they don't have to answer. This is what power looks like in the modern world. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just optional rules. And the rest of us watching from the ground, wondering if the institutions we built to govern ourselves still mean anything when someone gets wealthy enough to treat them as suggestions. If you think this matters, if you think anyone should be held accountable, regardless of their net worth, share this video. Because the only power we have left is making sure people know.